Terrorists attacked us and killed 3,000 of our citizens before we started the freedom agenda in the Middle East. What did Iraq have to do with what?
The attack on the World Trade Center.
Nothing, except for it's part of, and nobody's ever suggested in this administration that Saddam Hussein ordered the attack.
Welcome back to Inside Iraq. We are talking about the linkage between September 11 and Iraq with Abdel Bari Atwan, editor-in-chief of Al-Quds Al-Arabi, and Ra'nan Ghassin, former senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Ra'nan Ghassin, on February 5th, 2003, Colin Powell presented his country's case to the United Nations, in which he alleged that Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi, a very famous terrorist that was killed later on in Iraq, is being harbored by the Iraqi regime. He omitted to mention that he was in northern Iraq, in a very remote part of northern Iraq, currently under the control of the Kurds. At the time, it was under the control of the current Iraqi President Jalal Talbani. Was he deliberately misleading the United Nations? Was he deliberately removing certain information? Was this an act of deception? Or was he, and that is unbelievable, a foreign secretary of the United States not knowing geography?
No, there's another option, and I've mentioned it before, and I want to make it very clear. This is a new type of warfare, new type of organization. The intelligence services of the major powers in the world, including the United States, were not ready to accumulate and get the exact intelligence information necessary to fight this kind of warfare. And they went through a trial and error. So I don't think there was deception. There was really assessments and information which was not accurate, which was did not give the exact look. The fact that he was in Talabani's territory, still, hey, he was under the reign or the rule of Saddam Hussein.
Ra'nan Ghassin, since 1991, the United States established a no-fly zone through the 36th parallel. No Iraqi control extended beyond that, Abdel Bari Atwan. So when Colin Powell says Abu Mus'ab al-Zarqawi in the north under Iraq control, he's insinuating as if Saddam has brought him in order to do some sort of attacks.
It was a deliberate deception. Colin Powell actually was deceived, like the American people, like the Arab people, like the whole international community. So Colin Powell also appeared in UN Security Council showing pictures of Iraqi mobile chemical and biological plants, and we remember that very well. And also Colin Powell actually was talking about Iraq importing uranium from Niger, which we discovered that it was a pure lies. Also Tony Blair appeared on the front of the parliament saying that Saddam Hussein will prepare his weapon of mass destruction in 45 minutes. So that's all deliberate lies in order to justify this brutal, immoral, illegal war against Iraq.
Right. You make it sound as if Iraq under Saddam Hussein was a paradise where people were living in freedom and democracy. You forget what happened, the kind of fear and terrorism it instilled.
How are they living
in the
now under the American?
Tell me. In the Gulf States. It's not. You can't pinpoint. Okay, the American made mistakes. They made mistakes in this war against terrorism because they didn't see the scope of it, because they were shocked at the beginning. But they understood that what is at stake here is fighting against those who defy, I would say, Western civilization, who are trying to bring down the world economies. And Saddam Hussein was not pure in heart and mind.
Let me answer you. Okay, Iraq wasn't a paradise under Saddam Hussein. Tell me about Iraq under the American. I was looking at Al Jazeera International just yesterday. People are actually breaking their fasting in the daytime simply because it was actually boiling hot, and there is no electricity, there is no water, there is no fuel for their cars. They are suffering from the lack of security. They are suffering from the lack of jobs. What Iraq now? Tell me, under the American, is Iraq under the American better? Is the dismembered Iraq now you are proud of? Is this the Iraq the American promised the Iraqi people to be? They promised the Iraqi to Baghdad will be like New York and Mosul will be like San Francisco. Is it like that now? Do you see Iraq is better now than Iraq during Saddam Hussein?
No, it's not because of the American invasion, so-called, of Iraq, but of the fact that terrorism continued to reign there, that they are defying the legitimate government of Iraq.
Who is responsible for terrorism?
They're killing policemen. They don't want to bring law and order into the country. Now, you also have to look at other reports, not just Al Jazeera International, and in some parts of the country, you do see recuperation. You do see that the country is being rebuilt, and you do see the economy starting to get back in place. Albeit in a very difficult situation because of continuous terrorist attack, not because of American presence.
But who bring this lawlessness to Iraq? Who? It is the American invasion. Before Iraq, before the invasion, the American invasion, Iraq was a stable country despite the no-fly zone, despite the American continuous bombardment of this country. Iraq used to have, they used to have water, used to have electricity, used to have security. And who brought Al-Qaeda to Iraq? It is the American. It is not Saddam Hussein. You have to remember that. We have to set the record straight.
Yeah, okay. No. But you see, what happened is that America did not understand yet at that time the nature of this new type of warfare, of the ability of terrorist organization to terrorize the countryside. They did not expect terrorists to be supported from Iran. They did not expect terrorists and weapons to be smuggled from Syria into Iraq. That's what fuels the war.
They did not expect that, Ranan Gissim, but let me add a new dimension to it. Hold on just a second. Since we are talking about
mistakes. They made mistakes.
One of the mistakes, whether it's deliberate or not deliberate, here it is. When they started to talk between a meeting in Czech, in Prague, between Mohammed Atta, one of the lead executors of 9/11, and an Iraqi intelligence officer in Prague, a member of the Iraqi embassy, Mr. Al-Ani. The Czech prime minister, he was livid. He contacted the administration. He contacted the State Department. He said, there is no such meeting. It never happened. Well, I'm telling you, nothing happened. And that act and that story lingered for weeks and weeks and months and months. It was even part of the presentation by Colin Powell to the Security Council about Al-Qaeda and Iraq.
Well, even if that is true, and I don't know because I haven't been in that meeting and I don't know if that story tells, the fact was that Iraq was leading under Saddam Hussein the whole effort to bring down, I would say, the kind of Western civilization that we wanted, the modernization, and it instilled fear. What happened under Saddam Hussein, not just in Iraq, but around the Gulf states? And look what happens today. So I'm not saying the situation in Iraq today is perfect, but if the Iraqi people support their government, if the Iraqi people resist terrorism,
go ahead, Abdul Bari.
And for that we have to check. We have to check
I'll tell
why.
you, Mr.
Why
Gissin,
is there motivation to support terrorism? I can tell you one thing. No, wait a minute. I can tell you one thing.
You know why?
One thing.
You know why the American
I want to tell you the mistake of the Americans. No, I'll give you a professional view. The mistake of the Americans. The mistake was that they dismantled the Iraqi army, okay? If they did not dismantle the Iraqi army,
let's close with Abdul Bari.
There would be a force to ensure security.
Abdul Bari, before you answer, let me ask you, one of the charges against Iraq, hold on, is that Saddam Hussein supported Palestinian terrorism. That is when he started paying $10,000 and $20,000 and $40,000 to Palestinian suicide bombers. That was taken against him, not by the Americans alone, but also by the Israelis as part of the campaign to instigate the Americans to attack Iraq.
Desmond Tutu, the respectable South African leader, bishop, he said, the problem in the world now originated because the American administration was hijacked by the Israeli and used to serve the Israeli interest. Mr. Gissin is saying that it was American mistakes. No, it was Israeli mistakes. Because the Israeli consider themselves are the expert of the Middle East, the expert of the guerrilla warfare, and they're supposed to advise the American correctly. But the problem, because they want to use this superpower for their own interest, selfish interest, they actually push the American to invade and destroy and dismember and dismantle the Iraqi army, as he said. This is the problem. Talking about Saddam Hussein giving $10,000 to the families of the suicide bomber, he was doing a human case. He is actually, those family, nobody to support them because the Israeli are bombarding them, occupying their territories, depriving them, as we see in Gaza now, from medicine, from foods, from employment, from water, from everything. So Saddam Hussein was doing a human job. He wasn't actually supporting supporting suicide bomber.
I have to end this show. Abdul Bari Atwan, editor-in-chief of Al-Quds Al-Arabi, and Ra'nan Gissin, former senior advisor to Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. Gentlemen, thank you for being guests on Inside Iraq. To access the show and to send us your comments, please go to aljazeera.net/English. That's all the time we have for this week. Join me next week when we take another look inside Iraq. Until then, this is Jassim Azawi. Goodbye.